Okay, so we now have our spine and neck in place. Hopefully you've gone ahead and made it into an HDA and you've promoted all of your parameters that you want to see or hand off to your animators. Maybe you have something where you can blend your IK and FK chains. You can choose whether your animators show the different sets of controls using those rig pose configurations that we played around with. You've promoted all of the parameters you want to be able to animate with, and you've locked off all other aspects that maybe you don't want your animator to be able to use. So, or maybe that it doesn't make much sense to be able to use. Perfect. So now let's talk about our arms. We're going to do the arms next. So I'm going to set up our arm similar to the way we set up the legs, which is going to be with an IK and an FK chain. I also want to be able to control the two shoulder joints that we have in place whenever I want to. So let's just start by putting down a delete joints node here and seeing what I want to set up first. Let's see, we have our, our wrist and our elbow and our shoulder area. We've got like 3 joints for our shoulder area that we need to deal with. I'm going to set up the hands as their own HDA just so that things don't get too cluttered with the arm HDA and the arm setup in general. So the first thing that I kind of want to do is just be able to set up our clavicle region. These two guys right here. And I think that the main way that I'm going to use these two joints is as just to keep them in FK most of the time, to be able to position either our root of our IK or to just control our joints in FK like normal. So I'm going to take our shoulders for now, and we'll just set these guys up real quick. And I'm going to, come back into our legs and steal our library again. And if you, don't want to keep copying and pasting this set of controls, you obviously could make maybe just one HDA out of them and give it one output and just be able to put down your HDA wherever. And then whenever you add new control geometry to it, you can update the HDA and it'll be available to you on all future projects and to all cross projects as well. But for now, I'm just going to do it this way. So we have all of our control geometry here. So this will be our shoulders. And we'll just put down a rig pose. And I'm actually going to, yeah, this is fine, keeping this direction. So our rig pose here is going to be our shoulder controls. We could put down an attach joint geo here. And we can use it in our library. And let's see, what does our FK controls look like again? They're probably going to do. So let's just attach some FK controls up here. Perfect. And let's see how just it compares to the body. Yeah, that'll probably be fine, I think. And now let's put down a skeleton blend, and we'll blend it back in to our main chain here. Perfect. Now when we pose our shoulders, we should be posing our whole arm down the way. Great. Once again, that rig pose has encountered that odd bug where things remain locked even though this is a new node and we're editing things separately. Just keep an eye out for that. So we have our shoulders in place now. Now I kind of want to just go in and set up that IK chain that we had set up before. I'm going to grab our root after the point of our blending shoulders though. So let's just set up our needed joints here. So we're going to grab our arm for our IKs here. We'll just call it arm elements, or just arm. We're going to need our main 3 points, and actually on our other side too. Perfect. Great. Now we have our arms. We can unparent them so that we can control the IK elements separately. Our asterisk just means grab everything, and we can see that everything is unparented now. And now we can set up our IK chains, our rig pose, and then our IK chains. So this will be rig pose, IK controls, and our IK chains here. We're going to put that into our IK drivers as such, and our solved state, our skeleton here that we want to input, comes from our main chain, which is going to be from our shoulders over here. Why am I grabbing our main chain over here if it's separate from our chain up here? Well, I want our root point, our shoulder point, to be changed as we move things. And I'm realizing that this might we might run into some issues here. So let's just test this out. Let's take our shoulder and our elbow and our tip. We'll match by names. And we might not get the results we want to when we are editing this rig pose, just because when we move our shoulder up here, let's see what happens when we move our shoulder. We might get something, oh no, this is the exact output that I was hoping for. So when we move our shoulder here, we can see that we're moving the root point of our IK chain here, but our end point is still following along with our IK controls here, which is exactly what I was hoping for. So now we can get him to shrug, but his hands can remain where they were. So if this character was me right now, my hands are on the desk, but I can still shrug my shoulders without moving my hands too much. Perfect. I'm also going to turn on orient tip so it stops moving our hand whenever we rotate. Great. So far, so good. We can put down attach joint geo here. And we can set our control objects. So our endpoints here, we want to make sure that those are our IK controls. That works for me. And we want to get our elbow controls to be those pole vector balls that I made earlier. And I'm also going to add in another rig pose here, just as an offset for those pole vectors. So that our elbows always tend to bend backwards when editing our IK chains here. Perfect. So for now, that's our IK chain. Pretty simple. But let's say our IK chain, we want to be able to control whether our hands follow our root or our cog here. Right now, if we wanted our IKs to move with the root, to move with the world space, so let's say we put our hand here up against a wall, and our character moves around a corner, you know, positioning his feet, and his cog moves around the corner. Our legs and our leg system right now won't allow that to happen. We'll take our hand with us because we're actually posing that hand after we've posed our cog. So wherever our cog happens to be at that time, we then are posing our skeleton. So we don't necessarily always want that. Maybe this is okay if, say, you have something moving with your character that you want your IK in control of. But in a lot of cases, we don't really want our arms to move with our cog. We can see that our legs don't. So why do we want our arms like that? We don't. So we have to accommodate for grabbing our skeleton before our cog movement. What does that mean for us? It simply means that we need to grab the skeleton and blend it in prior to our posing, so that we can determine if we wanted to pose with our cog or if we wanted to pose with our root. We can also do, we can also just grab our root maybe and create a parent constraint or any other kind of system, but we want to make sure we can choose whether our IK endpoint here, just our endpoint, is following our root or our cog. Our shoulders, we still want our shoulders to follow along with our body. The other thing we might encounter is if we take our spine here, we have a similar issue. We can see that posing our spine in any way takes our hand and reposes it as well, because we're posing our hand after the spine. So we want to take those pieces of information, we want to get our joints before those operations happen. So we can just grab our output from our legs to grab before our spine. And if we want to, we can either figure out a way to constrain our wrists to our root, or we can grab before our cog movement to get information from. Getting information from our before our cog movement, which happens in our FK legs, will also give us the same information before our spine, obviously, since we're grabbing it up the chain by 2. So let's go ahead and take our joint structure before it's been modified by our cog or our spine or our legs or whatever. And we'll take a delete joints node here. And this is going to just grab our wrists that we need, our endpoints, right? So let's grab our wrists. Perfect. now we're grabbing our wrists before the posing of our spine or our cog. And we need to give it to our offset here, our IK controls, so we can pump in our information before we start posing, so we can determine what space we want to be in, whether we're following along with the spine and our cog, or if we want to be following along with fresh space, world space kind of thing. So we'll just take a skeleton blend here, and our point that we want to blend to goes to the right, and our point that we want to blend from is on our left here. So we'll call this skeleton blend precog. Perfect. And we want to make sure that we might run into problems if we don't keep it in world space, and we might run into problems if we do choose world space. Let's see, if we just take our wrists here, which are the only things we want to blend, right? And we look at our blending here. Right now we're towards where we were just grabbing it pre-spine. But let's say we pose our cog really quick so we can actually see that change. So we can see right now we're grabbing our wrists with after our cog and spine positions. If we blend towards our root, we actually have some fine blending because luckily due to our unparent system here, we have the same kind of parent structure that our delete node has. Since we just have our one joints, they're parented under nothing. Our blend does well without being in world space, which is what we want. We want a nice linear blend. If we had a different kind of parent structure, let's say we blended before we unparented things, we would get something a lot less fun, as we can see here. So just be wise as to where and when you're blending things, and where and when you're grabbing information in your posing. So now we have precog, and we can determine if we want our IKs to follow along with our cog and spine, or if we want it to follow along with our world space before our cog points. Our controls still won't follow root right now, so we'll still want to set up something to allow them to follow our root. So maybe up here where we deleted all of our joints, maybe we want to grab a few more, maybe just our cog, or sorry, just our root, to be able to add a parent structure into our wrists before we start posing them. So now if we parent our wrists under the root, hopefully when we move our root with our legs here, everything moves together. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, we actually didn't need this parent structure if we wanted things to follow along with the root. Or never mind, we did, because our root joints that we were grabbing pre-cog are all the way over here, right? If we blend over to them, that's where they are in position space. So we want to figure out how we can get these points to follow our root, since right now they aren't. Okay, so if we want our IK joints to follow our root, and we want them to not follow our cog here, we might have to think about a different setup than what we have currently. Right now we're grabbing it before we move our root, and we move our root and our cog at the same point here. So maybe we can go back and make a separate root control, but I think that'd be kind of tedious since, well, since we set things up so nicely already with our IK system here. So thinking through this, if we just grab our cog, or sorry, our root from our movement here, let's take our delete joints here, and we grab our root after we've moved it, and we call that grab root. And we get our wrists pre-cog. And we set up a quick parent structure here so that our wrists we deleted, and we need to merge these guys together, so that the wrists we grabbed and the new root that we have are parented. Oops, we need to make sure we're grabbing the non-selected. We don't actually want a parent system here. My mistake. We want a constraint system here, a parent constraint, so that we're forcing our wrists to move with our root as we come along here. So let's get a rig vop down. We'll take our root and put it into our second input, and our wrists in our first input. We'll put down a parent constraint here, and we will get our wrists, our set point transform, that's fine. We are going to need 2 parent constraints, since we're going to do one for each of our wrists. And we need our root. And we also need to get our point transforms for our wrists. Perfect. So we have our root, which is going to become our new parent for each of these systems, for each of these joints. And these joints are our X forms, and they are put into our output here. And as we can see already, our wrists pop to where we want them to be. Exactly how we were hoping. So we will constrain the wrists with this node here. And instead we'll put this into our blend. And now whenever we want to blend between our following our cog and spine to following our root. Perfect. So we have a clever system of grabbing joints and joint chains when we need them in terms of operation, and we're giving it that information to us at our current stage of animation. Perfect. So next, let's just quickly set up our FK joints, and then we can go into creating an HDA. So we'll get our FK joints here. Oops, which was just a rig pose, my mistake. And we can just take that off of our shoulders. And we need a delete joints. Since we want our FK to follow along with our shoulders anyhow, right? That's what we will do. Our shoulder has some pose here, so I'm just going to clear that out. Perfect. Now it looks more in line with what I was expecting. And we'll just get our 3 points that we didn't already pose in FK, and that we did pose in IK. So as we can start to see here as well, I just want to point out that our rig can start to kind of get spiderwebby in just how the nodes look based on when we are grabbing the information we need. We can get a lot of crossovers and whatnot, and that's maybe just one of the technical familiarities with character rigging. If you've ever done rigging before, it can get just kind of complicated. And so can a lot of Houdini in general. So let's continue with our FK chain here. We can put down a rig pose, or sorry, a attached geo. And we can hook up our FK controls as well into all of these guys. Perfect. Easy peasy. And now we'll want to blend between these two guys. And I'll set up a separate blend for each arm. So I'll put this down. We'll call this blend L arm. And we'll just grab our left arm here. Ooh, I actually forgot to blend back into our main chain, which we will do right here. There we go. We're just going to clear our group there. Blending towards our FK pose. Now when we pose our shoulders, we should be posing our FK as well. And there we go. We can see that that blend has worked well for us. Now we can go ahead and blend our chains together. Like I said, our IK chain already has a blend in it, so we don't need to worry about that. We do, however, want to make sure we set up both arms. So I'll grab my right arm, my mid arm, and the wrist. Perfect. I'm also going to delete any transforms here, and for now I will pose with following our cog, so that just all our joints are in place and it looks good, and we can tell if something goes wrong. Now we'll put down our skeleton blend. We can blend this as the left arm, and this is actually our FK, main and FK. So we're going to want to make sure we grab our left arm here, which should just be our 3 joints that we edited in our IK. And to test this, actually, I will just turn back on that skeleton blend. We can see those chains are built as such. And now if we blend our left arm, we can see it go between those poses. And even if we pose our shoulder here, it should work for us as well. We see that shoulder being raised on our IK chain, and we see it being posed as well with our FK. Our shoulder, our FK chain is following along with our shoulder, as we would hope. Perfect, so that's our left arm. Our right arm can be the exact same thing, we just have to replace our joint selection. and rename the node. Perfect. Great. And we'll take one more skeleton blend, and I'll take the left as our main chain. Since both of these nodes have all of our joints needed, we'll want to make sure that our main chain is blending to the right always for only our right arm here. So we'll only grab our right arm joints here. Now when we control where our right arm is with this blend, it pushes that information forward to our combined blend. Perfect. So now, in essence, our arms have been set up. I want you to go in and create an HDA for these IKFK arms. Know that you'll probably need to create multiple inputs for your IK arms node, and you'll want to label them. We have an input from pre-cog motion here. We have an input from after our cog motion, and we have our main input from our spine that follows our spine and our FK system allows us to follow the spine and the cog and stuff. But our IK system needs our rest skeleton and our cog skeleton. So you'll need to create an HDA with multiple inputs, and you'll need to hook those inputs in properly. Next, we'll talk about our fingers.